Hello to everyone who's here tonight. I'll give people a few minutes to arrive. It's wonderful to see everyone tonight after such a long absence. If you are watching on Facebook or YouTube or Twitter, let me know that you're here by sending me a little message. I'm Mrs. Q, and the year is 1790, and we are in my parlor in Hanover Square, New York City. And welcome to my home here tonight. You just wait a few more minutes for people to arrive, take their seats, get comfortable. I see a few messages from people. If any of my friends are here from Staten Island, I believe that when I help to host the Staten Island Film Festival next month, I think I'll wear this wig and this hat, but very likely a different dress. Hello to everyone. It's 1790, Hanover Square, New York. It is a beautiful spring evening here in the city. And in case you don't know, 1790 is the year after George Washington became president under the United States Constitution. So the American Revolution is completed. The Constitution has been ratified. We now have a president, we have a Senate, we have a House of Representatives, a cabinet, and a Supreme Court. So this is the beginning of our country, where I'm coming from tonight. And through the incredible ability of technology, I'm able to address you from the past. So for those of you who've been my fans in the past, hello, it's good to see you again. For those of you who are new, oh, I have a message here. Hold on, let me open my chat box. Hello to the McCabe's who are here, old friends of mine. So I think I have some other old friends here tonight. I haven't heard from you, but I'm getting messages that you're there. So I am Mrs. Q, and as I said, it's 1790, and a little bit about me. So those of you who've known me for quite some time, you know my story, but for those of you who are new, I am Mrs. Q, the former Miss C, and I am a merchant here in the city of New York in the late 18th century. You might think that's strange that I'm a merchant, but we do have lady merchants, and that is not as unusual as you might think. I grew up Miss C with one sister, an older sister, and a father and mother who were originally from the city of Naples in what you call Italy in your time. My father's father was a tradesman, a merchant who dealt with London and did business in London. And my father, as a young man, followed in his footsteps, took over his business. Excuse me, I have to see what our dog is doing. Okay, he's all right. He's not doing anything bad. Followed in his footsteps and took over his business. And in traveling to New York, decided to settle in New York. So my mother and father came and settled here in New York and expanded his father's or my grandfather's business. Now, if you know the early history of our city, you'll know that that's not unusual at all. From the time we were the colony of New Netherland, the small city of New Amsterdam, it wasn't unusual for sons or daughters to come here as a representative of their parents' business elsewhere and set up business here in New York. And there were a number of ladies who did that as well as gentlemen. So my father took over his father's business and settled here in New York. While he was getting started, before he had very much wealth, my mother was a dressmaker, or a mantua maker in my time, a dressmaker in your time, and a fine dressmaker she was. Now, my father and mother decided that both of their daughters should be reasonably well educated for the time. So we both learned to read and write. We learned some math and some history and just some other things to help us get on in life, a little bit of the classics, classical literature. We read sermons from Sundays and things like that that would give us a well-rounded girls' education. My sister became a dressmaker like my mother, and my father, seeing that he had only two daughters, decided to teach one daughter his business, and that was me. So I spent most of my time in this shop here in New York with my father, learning his business, learning how to deal with everyone, learning how to order things, learning how to keep inventory, learning how to negotiate with ship captains, how to track shipments, how to get inventory in, how to pay the customs and duties, and how to navigate the politics of New York, which of course is always important in having a successful business, being able to navigate the politics at the time. So that was my upbringing. My sister, though, being a fine dressmaker as well as my mother, made her way into the wealthier families of the Hudson Valley and married into the great Van Rensselaer family. So you may hear me refer to my sister as Mrs. Van R. and to myself, Mrs. Quinones, as Mrs. Q, which is a little bit easier for us to say, a little bit shorter and easier. My name growing up was Castelli, a nice Italian name. You've probably heard of my father, Mr. Castelli, and my mother, Mrs. Castelli. And I married Mr. Quinones. My husband is the son of a Spanish fur trader. My in-laws are from Spain. My husband was born here, but as a young man, he learned the Spanish fur trade, and we eventually met. He courted me, and we married. Him marrying me was quite an interesting event in that most young men generally married a lady like me who had access to a business, who would be inheriting a business and wealth for the wealth. My father, therefore, took a lot of time to get to know his future son-in-law to be sure that the interest in his business would not be lost, would not be squandered. Now, you may know that ladies like me do not own our own property. We cannot own our own businesses. This is under British law. Prior to British law, when we were a Dutch colony, we were able to own businesses and property. But once Britain took over the colony, we became New York. That became impossible. We do have some rights, though, that are a little different from the other colonies, and that is that a husband cannot dispose of his wife's property or income without her written permission, and the permission must be given without the husband present. So that affords us a little bit of protection, but I should say honestly that that does not totally eliminate coercion, does it? There still could be some coercion involved there. Luckily for me, Mr. Q is not that type of gentleman. We've got along quite well over the years, and he has been very helpful to me in my business, and of course, making introductions for me in his fur trade. So that has been very good for us. Mr. Q by now is retired from the fur trade, although I am still running the family business here in New York. Now, of course, the Revolutionary War came about, and we were both staunch Whigs. My husband was a dedicated member of the New York Sons of Liberty, both of us being Whigs or patriots and fully dedicated to the cause of independence. As a result of that, we had to flee New York City for 7 years. As you might know, the city was occupied by British forces from 1776 through 1783. During that time, Mr. Q served as a major general in Washington's army, and I ran the family business from up in the Hudson Valley. So I removed to the Hudson Valley during that time. We came back after the war and reestablished ourselves. But at that time, Mr. Q had had quite enough and was no longer interested in the fur trade, and formally retired from the fur trade and has been assisting me here in our home business. Now, I should be seeing messages from all of you, and I'm not sure why I'm not. So I'm going to just restart a little app I have running here. Please bear with me while I restart it. That should show me your comments. So if you are commenting and I'm not responding, I apologize to you. This is the first I've done this in a while. There they are. Now I see who's here. Give me a moment to see who's here. Oh, a lot of old friends are here tonight and some new friends as well. Thank you so much for joining us here tonight. I appreciate it. So back to our story. So those of you who are arriving to join us this evening in the parlor may have noticed Mr. Q out dabbling in the garden with his telescope. As normally you may have noticed on Fridays when we've met, Mr. Q was off at the Merchant's Coffee House with the gentleman. But Mr. Q has announced that he is no longer interested in politics, that politics is for the younger men. He is disgusted, he says, that the young men have returned to a divisive and factional system of politics that we had before the war, which he hoped would not continue after the war. He says young men in the town, like Mr. Hamilton and Mr. Burr and Mr. Clinton and their followers, have made the city devolve into useless factionalism. He says they no longer remember why we fought the war. They're too far removed from it, even though some of them were officers, you might remember Mr. Burr and Mr. Hamilton among them. He has given up on politics and has decided to do, he says, only what he finds rewarding. So this evening he's setting up his telescope in the garden and can no longer be seen as a regular at the Merchant's Coffee House. And a number of his gentleman friends are feeling this way about politics at this time post United States Constitution. Let me see. Oh, some more people have joined. I'm glad to see all of you as well. So I hope you recall that getting the Constitution ratified was quite a difficult task. And move something out of my way here. Was quite a difficult task. Oh, Miss Healy is here. Hello, Miss Healy. Hello. Hope you're enjoying the evening. Getting the Constitution ratified was quite a difficult task, wasn't it? Because Mr. Hamilton from New York and Mr. Madison from Virginia were not given permission to throw out the Articles of Confederation and write a new document, what we call the United States Constitution. Therefore, ratification was quite difficult. It was very difficult here in New York. A long fight to get it ratified. And you might know New York only ratified after there was an agreement of later changes or amendments, most specifically the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments, part of the negotiation to get New York to ratify. At that time, factionalism in New York became unbearable as far as Mr. Q was concerned, the group that you might refer to as Federalists and Democratic Republicans or Anti-Federalists. Mr. Q falling quite staunchly in the group of Anti-Federalists or Democratic Republicans and seeing many flaws with the Constitution and its future implementation, but now growing completely disgusted by all of the young, as he would call them, rascals, but never publicly, of course, because the insult is too extreme, but at home, maybe calling them rascals. He is no longer interested. He said he did his part as a Whig, a patriot, a son of liberty, and an officer, and now has retired to enjoy the rest of his life. I am still keeping the shop, though, and since my shop caters to all the fine ladies of New York, I get to hear quite a bit about their husbands' opinions and the ladies' opinions as well as to what is going on between these two factions, the Federalists and Anti-Federalists. I keep my own views to a minimum, of course, because I do want the ladies to continue shopping in my store. And some of them are prominent ladies of gentlemen on both sides of the argument. So I try to keep myself neutral when discussing these things in public. Some of you who've known me for some time also know that I have been very good friends for many years with Mrs. Burr, the former Theodosia Bartow. I am very good friends with Mrs. Burr and dote over their daughter, young Theodosia, who is quite a young lady at this time, 7 years old and quite impressive, I have to say. So if any of you have any questions, I welcome them. I see Mr. Facemeyer from Manassas. Ms. Flanagan tells me I look marvelous. Thank you very much. I have only worn this outfit, I'll back up a little bit, one other time, and that was last April when I did a tour with Congressman James Madison. So this outfit has not been worn before that. It is a beautiful Thai silk, or in my time, I think it would be Siam silk. It's a beautiful Siam silk given to me as a gift from a childhood friend, Mrs. Rankich. And of course, I added some flounce, some lace. This is one of my favorite silk hats, which I very much enjoy wearing, especially with this wig, with this hair. It's nice and tall and big, and for the 1790s, very fashionable. Many of you, I think, know that I'm a big fan of French fashion, and I carry many types of French fabrics and French ribbons, French laces in my shop for the ladies who have a taste for the French in their clothing. Some ladies, of course, prefer the English look or whatever. I have many of those different things in my shop to cater to the ladies. Fabrics, notions, perfumes, hair powders, makeup, all of the sorts of things that make ladies look beautiful. Jewelry, I have some beautiful blue crystal earrings on, some feathers, whatever a lady might need. I enjoy wearing the items from my shop so ladies can see how beautiful they look. I normally would not be dressed this fancy for you in the evening, but I have just come from the shop, so I'm still dressed. Many of you know that sometimes I greet you in what we call a short gown or a bedgown, which is a much formal jacket worn over my undergarments. As the weeks go on, I'll go over clothing a lot more with you so that you'll understand the clothing. And of course, when I come to you from different decades, I'll change my outfit and my hair and makeup to suit the decade from which I'm addressing you. So I just like to know, since this is our first night together for quite a while, I've been absent for almost a year. As you know, I had a back injury last June, and my new studio setup here allows me to stand, so I'm much more comfortable than I would be sitting. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them in the comments. I'll be happy to answer. Next week, I'll be addressing a more in-depth topic, but tonight I just wanted to get together, reintroduce myself, say hello to everyone, and just greet you for the first time in a while. As for things that are coming up, if you'd like to come and see Mrs. Q in person and you're in the New York area, my next in-person appearance will be June 24th in Staten Island at the Staten Island International Summer of Shorts Film Festival, where I will be interviewing performers and filmmakers on the red carpet. And if you follow my Facebook social media, you may have got a hint today of the dress I might be wearing to that. I believe I'm going to make a new dress for that. And so I'll be wearing something new that night, but as I said, probably this wig and this hat. So come out to see us in Staten Island. Your ticket sales go to benefit one of the oldest churches in New York, the Old Dutch Reformed Church of Staten Island, which also has one of the oldest and most historic graveyards, dating to the 1650s. And let me read another note. Oh, Miss Wetzel, thank you so much. It's so good to see you and hear from you again. Do I have some Dutch descendants friends? I absolutely do. I don't know if any of them are on our live stream today, but I do have friends who are descendants of some of the people buried in that old Dutch churchyard. And I suppose I should announce tonight for the first time that I have recently joined the board of directors of the Old Dutch Church and the Staten Island Port Richmond Preservation Association. So I've joined the board in an effort to help bring attention to them and their needs and help to raise some money for them. So the first thing I'll be doing in that respect is participating in the film festival. My next appearance, if you're in the New York area, will be my annual tour on July 9th, along with Francis Tavern Museum. Well, I will be appearing fully in costume as Mrs. Q, celebrating the reading of the Declaration of Independence that happened on July 9th in 1776 and talking all about New York during the Revolutionary War. I don't think tickets are available for that yet, but I will be posting all over social media when they become available. And those will be available through the Francis Tavern Museum. And of course, that money goes to benefit the collection of the Francis Tavern Museum. The next appearance, and I hope I have the date right, I believe is July 29th, a Saturday. Again, I will be at the Old Dutch Reformed Church, and I will be lecturing on the spy rings that operated in the Revolutionary War. So we'll be hearing about the Culper spy ring, which many of you, I think, have heard of. We'll also be hearing about the Mercereau spy ring and the Mercereau family buried in the graveyard of that church. Those tickets will go to benefit the church, and that will also be live streamed. Live stream tickets will be available for that. And that night, that evening, I think it is, or is it afternoon? I'm not sure of the time. It might be an afternoon event. Anyway, I'll be posting about it. July's quite a ways off. We'll include a tour of the graveyard. So you'll get to see the historic graves and have a look at that historic graveyard. And then sometime in August, I have not set the date, I will be doing a one-time only tour the Great Ladies of Early New York, which will go over the ladies of colonial and early federal period New York. We'll walk around together. I will be Mrs. Q, and we'll stop either at the homes or shops and discuss these great ladies, most of them forgotten to history. I have not picked a date for that yet, but I will post that when it's available. And that tour also will be available on live stream for those of you who can't make it. And then the big event in September, the annual Culper Spy Day, September 9th in Setauket, New York. Well, I will be joining my friends in Setauket as exiled Mrs. Q, exiled from New York during the occupation. And I will be out in Setauket saying hello to my friends, Benjamin Talmadge, Anna Strong, Abraham Woodhall, and many others who will be out there that day. It'll be a wonderful day. Plan to come out and support us September 9th in Setauket, New York. It's a long way off. So if you're not in New York, you have plenty of time to plan your trip to Setauket. And for now, those are the in-person Mrs. Q events I know about. I may be adding some as the summer goes on. And of course, you can support my work. You can support my work on Venmo, on PayPal. You can also become a patron on Patreon. And as a patron, you'll get my Zoom link for each one of these. And when I finish the live stream, I stay around in the Zoom meeting a little longer to talk to everyone. And that's as low as $3 a month. You can support my work. So that's Patreon. I'm Mrs. Q NYC on Patreon. So please consider, if you start liking this every week, supporting my work. If you're on Facebook, you can give me stars to support my work as well. So I have some, Ms. Sturgis says she's planning to attend one or both of the Staten Island events. Wonderful. Someone, the Dutch people should be more aware of their history here in New Amsterdam. Absolutely. And in coordination with the Dutch Church, I will be focusing more on the Dutch history of our town, especially Staten Island, because, you know, Staten Island was settled first, and Staten Island was occupied by the British during the war as well. And it was a rather brutal and awful occupation that went on in Staten Island, more of which I'll be talking about. And of course, they were spying in Staten Island as well. So we want to remember our Dutch friends, not only in Lower Manhattan, but in Staten Island. So I think that's all for my introduction back to New York tonight. As I said, next week I'll start talking about more in-depth topics. And I think next week I'm going to talk about the Declaration of Independence, because Mr. Q is already complaining. He just went by, but you didn't see him. Mr. Q is already complaining that here in 1790, only 16 years, 14 years later, people have forgotten what the Declaration of Independence was all about, why it was written, why we ratified it, and why we fought so hard to protect it, and why the Crown fought so hard to destroy it. Mr. Q complains that already, only 14 years later, people have forgotten all about it. I hope you haven't forgot in your time, but if you have, join me next Friday and we'll talk all about the Declaration of Independence. So let me see if I missed anybody's comments. Thank you so much for being here with me tonight. I'm so happy to see all of you back. My very good friend Howling Fang is here. Of course, I know your real name. I won't divulge it. I hope very much to see you on some of these special tours this summer, and many of the others of you in New York City. So I will bid you good night for now. And we'll see you next Friday. If you have a topic that you would like to hear about, please feel free to send it to me on social media or an email. You can always reach me at Karen@patriottoursnyc.com, and I will be happy to consider that topic. Oh, my friend Howling Fang says he'd love to attend the Francis Tavern tour. Well, keep up with social media. I will be posting the link when the tickets are available. And when they become available, I will post the link in the live stream too, when they're ready. I think they said they'll be ready end of at end of this month, end of May, I think they'll have them up. And that is a really fun tour. It's the third year in a row I'll be doing that with Francis Terry Museum. So good night to everyone. It's a pleasure having you here in my parlor. Be careful on the way out. And if you see Mr. Q in the garden with his telescope, tell him hello and don't speak about politics. Thank you very much, and I will see you again soon.